says, in a tense showdown over the East River, police arrested hundreds of Occupy Wall Street demonstrators after they marched onto the bridge's Brooklyn-bound roadway. Now, you're talking about the New York Times, right? So the thing that's important to look at here is how they manifest the fear in American people when they tell you, when they change the way it's said and the way it's presented, and then they polish this angle and they shape this one. We went from the police allowing the people on there to exercise their right to protest free, and express their grievances, to here comes the terrorism aspect. And it's like, at some point in time, all the weak-minded masses who just accept things as they are, okay, well, this is the way it is. These guys are terrorists. These guys are terrorists. No, they're practicing their First Amendment rights.
That's right. And people don't understand that it's through your rights that that empowers you against these scumbags that are macing innocent people and really abusing their power. But, a question in the chat room was, is it spreading? Well, the front page of Drudge, I'm going to read the top headlines. Clash on Brooklyn Bridge, more than 700 arrested in Wall Street protests, dozens cuffed in Boston after targeting Bank of America, and that has to do with two things. That has to do with the way that they're doing foreclosures and the new $5 fee on the debit transactions. So now you're starting to see protests against Bank of America, but they're spreading everywhere else too. You've got protests springing up in Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver, and Seattle so far, all protesting Wall Street and the corruption on Wall Street. And to add to your point, Mike, lemonade stands. If you have a lemonade stand, you're a freaking terrorist.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's that crazy,
Girl Scout cookies.
But it's going to get. Now, see, this is the thing, and this, folks, this is something that could be that lightning in a bottle that we were talking about earlier on. And there was a Marine that posted on his Facebook page this morning.
Ward Riley.
That's right. It was, and this is on the MuncieFreePress.com, which has a link to this guy's Facebook page. But the Facebook entry says, the Marines are coming to Wall Street to protect the protesters. This is, quote, I'm heading up there tonight in my dress blues. So far, 15 of my fellow Marine buddies are meeting me there, also in uniform. I want to send the following message to Wall Street and Congress. I didn't fight for Wall Street. I fought for America. Now it's Congress's turn. My true hope, though, is that we veterans can act as a first line of defense between the police and the protesters. If they want to get to some protesters so they can mace them, they will have to get through the expletive Marine Corps first. Let's see a cop mace a bunch of decorated war vets. And he goes on for a little bit. It wouldn't be the first time, but you want to talk about a potential spark of an incident
where you have police, of immeasurable corruption. Yeah,
police and active duty or reservists, military squaring off, and these guys are disarmed. These guys are disarmed in their dress blues. So it's not like they pose a threat for from a military standpoint. But it's like you said earlier, Mike. If the cops try to ramrod their nightstick, or try to bully these guys, the Marines can, put that nightstick where the sun doesn't shine.
You betcha, man. My first thought on that was like, wait till whether the guys out there realize this or not, the United States Marine Corps has what they call a combatives program, where the color of their belts that they wear with their utility uniforms actually indicates the level of progress up that combatives program. And the black belt literally means that they have made it to the highest level of qualification, which means they're prepared for that level of combat. Tell you what, man, I'd love to have ringside seats.
Yeah, me too. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the Occupy Wall Street protest and much, much more. So stay tuned. You're listening to Freedom Link Radio on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Welcome back, folks. You want to know something? You want to know why Ron Paul is so popular with the military? Look at what these Marines are doing. Look at what they're doing to come to the aid of the protesters and fellow Americans. These kids, and a lot of them are kids, have gone out of their way and put their butts on the line to stand up for what's right, even though they're not going to be armed and everything else. I'm telling you, it's symbolic. This is huge. And if something happens to any of those Marines and whoever else shows up there, and they could call out the National Guard on them, you just don't even know how bad this could be. So that's why you have to pay very close attention. And Mike, you know, these protests, like I said before, they're springing up everywhere. This is and you won't find this in the American media, folks. I actually had to go and search some of this stuff using going through the UK. And so, Occupy Wall Street protests spread across the U.S. This is the Telegraph. And it says, as police arrest hundreds of protesters on the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City, more demonstrations began to spring up across the U.S. In Los Angeles, protesters gathered in front of City Hall and danced on buses with peace emblazoned on the side. A small protest was held in Chicago's financial district, where protesters held placards demanding jobs, not cuts. Protesters also turned out in Denver, gathering downtown before marching into the city chanting, "Occupy the streets." And all these protests were inspired by the Occupy Wall Street movement, which has seen hundreds of people camping out near the financial district in New York City and conducting marches calling for an end to home foreclosures and high unemployment. And that's one of the things that people don't understand. This was started by a very, very left-wing socialist group. But who cares? Who cares if it's a left-wing socialist group? You want to know something? They're still our brother and sister American, Joe Schmo Americans down there doing what everybody should be doing, which is stay plugged in, stay informed, and if you see something that you don't agree with, fight for it. Say something. These are our rights, man. And the fact is if we don't exercise them, if we don't value them, then they're going to be taken away. Because
I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, my thought was just that list of cities that you just rattled off there. I'm plagued with this image in my head of over the next, say, month or two or three or whatever. If these things don't subside, that essentially what you're going to do is you're going to see the mass eruption of that list of cities become the next, I don't know, Greece, Syria, all these other places that are going through exactly the same things. And London was burning a couple of weeks ago, and people didn't really hear anything about that very much. It's going to be one of those things that I'm immediately transported back to 1994 with the Rodney King thing. If something as simple as the Rodney King incident was enough to set Los Angeles, Chicago, and Atlanta on fire, could you possibly imagine? And if that's what it takes, if the peaceful protest, and I say 10 points, hey, I'm a hard right winger, dude. I'll be the first one to tell you. But if the leftist, version of the attack here is to come in from the peaceful standpoint, if that's what it takes to get these people to wake up and pay attention, if that's the start, if that's enough, you know what I'm saying? If that's enough to for a couple hundred people to get arrested, if it stops this nation from plunging into a violent physical confrontation, which honestly, Joe, is the next thing on the list. If they don't listen to people's voices, they're going to listen to their guns. I mean, it's not a matter of making a threat. I'm just saying that's the next logical step in progression.
Right. At the end of the day, we're all Americans, dude. At the end of the day, that's what we are, all brothers and sisters. This is our country collectively. It doesn't matter how many taxes you pay, how much you make, what color you are, what religion you believe in. It doesn't matter. All that stuff, at the end of the day, boils down to this. We are all Americans, and we, the people, are the vanguard of America. If we don't keep the watch and we don't do what we have to do to make sure that corruption and crime and oppression and tyranny and despotism, if we don't fight that and bring it down, man, then we are lost. And let's go to the phones. We got Jeff from Mass on the line. Jeff, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, Joe, I'm doing just fine. Well, Joe, I have some insight for you from my martial arts experience and security experience and other experience I have. You are so right. The police would not have a chance against the Marines or any military person for that matter, unless the police and military themselves, which leads me to the bad part. A lot of your state police officers are former Marines.
And that's true.
And I believe that they're hiring military-trained police officers for exactly the reason that you're talking about. Myself, for instance, if a police officer tried to hit me with a billy club, now, of course, I would not put myself in a situation where I would get arrested and I would talk my way out of it and so forth. I mean, I haven't had a fight in my adult life for a long time. But if a police officer did try to hit me with a billy club, I know techniques to where I can get out of the way of that billy club, disarm the billy club, and use the billy club against the police officer. Unless that police officer uses a gun on me, he's pretty much screwed, because a lot of police officers don't get the training unless they do the training on their own. I've talked to enough cops already to know this is a fact. That unless they train on their own, and a lot of them don't have time to train on their own. I mean, you ever see the weight of local police officers? They are fat. Holy cow.
Sure. There was an incident, Jeff. There was an incident down in Hampton Roads, Virginia, where they had a car pulled over, and the guy ended up being armed, and it happened in Virginia Beach, I think it was, and they called for backup, and they had like 6 cruisers there, and about 10 cops. They pumped 98 rounds into that car when he pulled his weapon, and they missed. They missed 98 rounds, and they missed. And you want to know, here's the problem though. It's a catch 22. The police officers and the police forces down south here, what happens is they don't get a monthly stipend for ammo to go target practice, to go down on the range anymore. Everything has to be on their own. Well, when you're first starting out on the force making $35,000 a year, you don't really have the money to be buying ammo and doing that kind of stuff. So you end up being, that's why, one of the parents that actually belong to or go to the same Taekwondo class that my son goes to, he's a police officer, and he's a very down to earth fella. But he says, I know where my shotgun is because I can't hit the broadside of a barn with my pistol.
10-4 on that.
And I mean, hey,
absolutely correct.
But he knows his limitations, which is good.
I do too. I'll tell you the styles I've taken up. One of the styles I've taken up is the Filipino style called Kali and Eskrima, which if you do some research on it, it's a knife fighting style. It's a stick fighting style. I've been exposed to it. I've taken up jiu-jitsu, the stuff that the military's trained in, jiu-jitsu, certain styles of kung fu, kempo. I mean, I've been around the block, and I know my limitations. My kicks aren't the greatest, but I stick with hands, close quarter combat, and gouging. Lots of gouging, fast takedowns, 1, 2, 3, put the guy out quick. That's the way I was trained. 1, 2, 3, put the guy out quick. I mean, but if you can negotiate your way out of it and restrain the guy, fine. If you can have 2 or 3 people restrain the guy and not hurt the guy, fine. But you have to be prepared to take it to that level. And a lot of martial arts schools, including Taekwondo, don't teach that. It's sports and tournament and so forth. And maybe the school your son's going to is a great school, but here's the thing. In these coming days, you're going to see inner city violence. You're going to see people breaking into people's houses to rape your wife. I mean, this stuff is no joke. And in a state like my state, you got to be creative. I almost got killed one time in a gang fight a long time ago. I'll never forget it. But that's not for this show. But mark my words: Marines versus policemen, Marines will win. And also too, you're right. One spark can blow this whole thing up like a Rodney King incident, and so forth. And you got agent provocateurs that will provide that. So I think ordaining the protest right now, my focus is getting warm weather clothing, which I will tomorrow, and basically running to New Hampshire. That's all my focus is on, getting into good tip-top physical shape and doing that. This country's doomed, and it's just a matter of time before you're right. People will eventually come out with the gun. Not in Boston. Boston's a